محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. عن جابر بن عبد الله الأنصاري عن فاطمة الزهراء عليه السلام بنت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله قال: سمعت فاطمة أنها قالت: دخل علي أبي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله في بعض الأيام فقال: السلام عليك يا فاطمة. فقلت: عليك السلام. قال: إني أجد في بدني ضعفا. فقلت له: أعيذك بالله يا أبتاه من الضعف. فقال: يا فاطمة، ائتيني بالكساء اليماني فغطيني به. فأتيته بالكساء اليماني فغطيته به وصرت أنظر إليه وإذا وجهه يتلألأ كأنه البدر في ليلة تمامه وكماله. فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسن عليه السلام قد أقبل وقال: السلام عليك يا أماه. فقلت: وعليك السلام يا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي. فقال: يا أماه، إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. فقلت: نعم، إن جدك تحت الكساء. فأقبل الحسن نحو الكساء وقال: السلام عليك يا جداه يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أدخل معك تحت الكساء؟ فقال: وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا صاحب حوضي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل معه تحت الكساء. فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسين عليه السلام قد أقبل وقال: السلام عليك يا أماه. فقلت: وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي. فقال لي: يا أماه، إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. فقلت: نعم، إن جدك وأخاك تحت الكساء. فدنا الحسين نحو الكساء وقال: السلام عليك يا جداه، السلام عليك يا من اختاره الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكما تحت الكساء؟ فقال: وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا شافع أمتي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل معهما تحت الكساء. فأقبل عند ذلك أبو الحسن علي بن أبي طالب عليه السلام وقال: السلام عليك يا بنت رسول الله. فقلت: وعليك السلام يا أبا الحسن ويا أمير المؤمنين. فقال: يا فاطمة، إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة أخي وابن عمي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. فقلت: نعم، ها هو مع ولديك تحت الكساء. فأقبل علي نحو الكساء وقال: السلام عليك يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال له: وعليك السلام يا أخي ويا وسيي وخليفتي وصاحب لوائي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل علي تحت الكساء. ثم أتيت نحو الكساء وقلت: السلام عليك يا أبتاه يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال: وعليك السلام يا بنتي ويا مرعتي، قد أذنت لك فدخلت تحت الكساء. فلما اكتملنا جميعا تحت الكساء أخذ بي رسول الله بطرفي الكساء وأومأ بيده اليمنى إلى السماء وقال: اللهم إن هؤلاء أهل بيتي وخاصتي وحامتي، لحمهم لحمي ودمهم دمي، يؤلمني ما يؤلمهم ويحزنني ما يحزنهم. أنا حرب لمن حاربهم وسلم لمن سالمهم وعدو لمن عاداهم ومحب لمن أحبهم. إنهم مني وأنا منهم، فاجعل صلواتك وبركاتك ورحمتك وغفرانك ورضوانك علي وعليهم، وأذهب عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. فقال الله عز وجل: يا ملائكتي ويا سكان سماواتي، إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضيئة ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا في محبة هؤلاء الخمسة الذين هم تحت الكساء. فقال الأمين جبرائيل: يا رب، ومن تحت الكساء؟ فقال عز وجل: هم أهل بيت النبوة ومعدن الرسالة، هم فاطمة وأبوها وبعلها وبنوها. فقال جبرائيل: يا رب، أتأذن لي أن أهبط إلى الأرض لأكون معهم سادسا؟ فقال الله: نعم، قد أذنت لك. فهبط الأمين جبرائيل وقال: السلام عليك يا رسول الله. العلي الأعلى يقرئك السلام ويخصك بالتحية والإكرام ويقول لك: وعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضيئة ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا لأجلكم ومحبتكم، وقد أذن لي أن أدخل معكم، فهل تأذن لي يا رسول الله؟ فقال رسول الله: وعليك السلام يا أمين وحي الله. إنه نعم، قد أذنت لك. فدخل جبرائيل معنا تحت الكساء. فقال لأبي: إن الله قد أوحى إليكم يقول: إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. فقال علي لأبي: يا رسول الله، أخبرني ما لجلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله. فقال النبي: والذي بعثني بالحق نبي واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا، ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا إلا ونزلت عليهم الرحمة وحفت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم إلى أن يتفرقوا. فقال علي: إذا والله فزنا وفاز شيعتنا ورب الكعبة. فقال النبي ثانيا: يا علي، والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا، ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا وفيهم مهموم إلا وفرج الله هما ولا مغموم إلا وكشف الله غما ولا طالب حاجة إلا وقضى الله حاجته. فقال علي عليه السلام: إذا والله فزنا وسعدنا. وكذلك شيعتنا فازوا وسعدوا في الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. رحم الله من يقرأ سورة الفاتحة.
سلام کے لیے میں درخواست کرتا ہوں برادر ارسلان معصومی کو ایک صلوات پڑھی علی محمد و آل محمد. بھائی دیگر نعرے صلوات.
فاتحہ. انسانیت کی شمع فروزہ حسین ہے، راہ وفا میں شاہ شہیدہ حسین ہے، سر کو کتا کے ہم کو دیا درس زندگی، افسانہ حیات کا عنوان حسین ہے. انسانیت کی شمع فروزہ حسین ہے، راہ وفا میں شاہ شہیدہ حسین ہے، سر کو قطع کے ہم کو دیا دس زندگی، افسانہ حیات کا عنوان حسین ہے. جو مر کے جینے کا حوصلہ ہے، حسین والوں سے مرنا سیکھو، حسینیت آئینہ ہے، حق کا اس آئینے سے سنورنا سیکھو، مسافران رہے وفا کے وفا کی تاریخ کہہ رہی ہے، پھر عباس کی ڈگر سے باحسن و خوبی گزرنا سیکھو. بھور میں جوروں سے بھور میں جورو ستم کے گر کر صدا دو، عباس با وفا کو وفا کے پیکر کے نام لے کر غم جہاں سے ابھرنا سیکھو.
یہ تھے ارسلان معصومی جنہوں نے بڑے خوبصورت انداز میں اپنا مولا کا ہدیہ پیش کیا. ان کے لیے ضرور دعا ضرور کیجیے گا. ایک صلوات پڑھی علی محمد و آل محمد. سلام مرسی کے لیے میں درخواست گزار ہوں جناب سبت کاظمی صاحب سے. ایک صلوات پڑھیے علی محمد و آل محمد. بار دیگر نعرے صلوات.
یا علی ولی ٹھیک ہے. ایک بآواز بلند صلوات.
اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد.
ایک اور بآواز بلند صلوات.
اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد.
غم حسین میں اشک عزا بہاتے ہیں، غم حسین میں اشک عزا بہاتے ہیں، یہ بخششوں کے دیے ہیں جو ہم جلاتے ہیں، یہ بخششوں کے دیے ہیں جو ہم جلاتے ہیں، صدا وہ رہتے ہیں عباس کی ضمانت میں، جو لوگ اپنے گھروں پر علم لگاتے ہیں، غم حسین میں
صلی اللہ محمد و علی محمد.
مانند علی بولتا قرآن ہے زینب، مانند علی بولتا قرآن ہے زینب، شبیر کے پیغام کا عنوان ہے زینب، شبیر کے پیغام کا عنوان ہے زینب، موجود ہے جس قافلہ حق میں امامت، اس قافلہ حق کی نگہبان ہے زینب، مانند علی بولتا.
اللہم صلی علی محمد و علی محمد.
سلام کی چند شیر سکینہ ڈھونڈنے بابا کی لاش آئی ہے، سکینہ ڈھونڈنے بابا کی لاش آئی ہے، یہ کیسی شام غریبان نے خاک اڑائی ہے، سکینہ ڈھونڈنے بابا کی لاش آئی کہا سکینہ نے اموں پلٹ کے آ جاؤ کبھی نہ مانگوں گی پانی قسم یہ کھائی ہے کبھی نہ مانگوں گی پانی قسم یہ کھائی ہے سکینہ ڈھونڈنے بابا کی لاش آئی لگائیں کس طرح قاسم کی ماں کا لیجے ابا میں ٹکڑوں کی صورت میں لاش آئی ہے سکینہ ڈھونڈنے بابا کی لاش آئی تڑپ رہی ہے بہشتی کی لاش دریا پر جفا سکینہ پہ شاید کسی نے ڈھائی ہے سکینہ ڈھونڈنے بابا کی لاش آئی غضب ہے شام میں غریباں کی شب کو پہرا ہے اکیلی زینب مستر فلک ستائی ہے اکیلی زینب مستر فلک ستائی صدا علیہ بنیا کرن سے آتی سکینہ ڈھونڈنے بابا کی لاش آئی ہے سکینہ ڈھونڈنے بابا کی لاش آئی ہے یہ کیسی شام غریباں نے خاک اڑائی ہے سکینہ ڈھونڈنے بابا فاتحہ نشان پڑھ جب اربعین کو آئے حرم قتل گاہ تاریک آسمانوں زمین تھی نگاہ پہنا تھا شکل کعبہ لباس سیاہ گیسو کھلے تھے سو گے شہید الہ میں گیسو کلیتے سوگے شہید الہ روئی جو شہزادیاں منہ ڈھانپ ڈھانپ لاش حسین رہ گئی بس کانپ کانپ کے لاش حسین رہ گئی بس کانپ کانپ کے یوں خاک پر پڑا تھا مراقبۃ آزاد جدا تھے لاشوں کے اور دست و پا بے گور و بے کفن تھے شہیدان کربلا کوئی کسی کی لاش پہ جز بے کسی نہ تھا کوئی کسی کی لاش پہ جز بے کسی نہ تھا افتاد خاک پر تھا سلیمان کربلا پر جبرائیل کا تھا نہ دامان کربلا پر جبرائیل کا تھا نہ دامان کربلا یوں پہلو حسین میں تھا لاشے بانچوں میں دودھ لپا انگوٹھا گلے میں وقت قضا ملا تھا جو اس کو جو آبش کھولے ہوئے دہن تھا وہ رش کے مئے منیر کھولے ہوئے دہن تھا وہ رش کے مئے ننا سا کرتا تن میں لہو سے بھرا ہوا ایک ہاتھ تھا حسین کا اس پر دھرا ہوا ایک ہاتھ تھا حسین کا اس پر دھرا ہوا اکبر تھے یوں قریب شہنشاہ نے ٹکڑے بدن کلیجے میں برچی جگر 18ویں برس میں زمانے سے کی نیزے کا پل ملا ثمرے گلشن حیات نیزے کا پل ملا ثمرے گلشن حیات فرزند پاتے پسرے بوترا دو چاند پہلوؤں میں تھے ایک آفتاب کے دو چاند پہلوؤں میں تھے ایک آفتاب کے ناگاہ کی نگاہ حرم نے سوئے دیکھا پڑا ہے لاشے عباس نیک سینے پہ مشک لاش کے پہلو میں دو ہر دم دہان زخم سے کہتا ہے وہ یہ بات ہر دم دہان زخم سے کہتا ہے یہ سینے پہ اب تلاک نشانی سکے پروا دریغ تشنا دہانی سکے نہ کے پروا دریغ تشنا دہانی سکے جس دم یہ حال گئے جو شہیدہ نظر پڑا بانوں نے لاشے علی اصغر اٹھا چادر سے پوچھا سو کا ہوا دودھ بانچوں مردے کے منہ کے بوسے لیے اور یہ کہا دے کے منہ کے بوسے لیے اور یہ تم سے بچھڑ کے میں رہی فریاد و اصغر کہو ڈرے تو نہیں قتل گاہ ہمیں اصغر کہو ڈرے تو نہیں قتل گاہ یا قصد دفن شاہ کا سجاد نے کیا زخموں سے پہلے نیزہ پیکاں کیے خود نے لگی جو قبر شہنشاہ کربلا ایک لوح نکلی جس پہ یہ مضمون تھا کدا ایک لوح نکلی جس پہ یہ مضمون تھا زہرا کے گیسوؤں پہ پڑی کی خاک ہے ابن ابو تراب کی یہ قبر پاک ہے ابن ابو تراب کی یہ قبر پاک پھر آئی اس مزار سے عابد کو یہ اے نائب حسین فدا تجھ پہ مصطفیٰ رکھ دے ہمارے ہاتھوں پہ لاشا حسین کا لاشا نبی کے ہاتھوں پہ عابد نے رکھ دیا لاشا نبی کے ہاتھوں پہ عابد نے رکھ دیا پھر عرض یہ نبی سے بجانے لولا نہ جان لو یہ امانت بطول کی لولا نہ جان لو یہ امانت بطول کی جب اربعین کو آئے
پر محمد و آل محمد صلوات درخواست گزار ہوں جناب سید اظہر صاحب سے کہ وہ آئیں اور مولا کی بارگاہ میں سلام پیش کریں ایک صلوات پڑھی اعلیٰ محمد و آل محمد
صلوات بابا بلند سغرا نے کہا ہائے برا در نہیں آئے اکبر نہیں آئے سغرا نے کہا ہائے برا در نہیں آئے اکبر نہیں آئے بیمار بہن ان کو کہاں ڈھونڈنے جائے اکبر نہیں آئے سغرا نے کہا ہائے برا در نہیں آئے اکبر نہیں آئے کیا جانیے کس بات پہ وہ مجھ سے خفا ہے نظروں سے نہا ہے نظروں سے نہاں ہے، یوں گھر سے گئے لوٹ کے پھر گھر نہیں آئے، اکبر نہیں آئے۔ صغرا نے کہا ہائے برادر نہیں آئے، اکبر نہیں آئے۔ دم آنکھوں میں اٹکا ہے، نظر در پہ پڑی ہے، مرنے کی گھڑی ہے، مرنے کی گھڑی ہے، کیا جانیے اب قبر میری کون بنائے، اکبر نہیں آئے۔ صغرا نے کہا ہائے برادر نہیں آئے، اکبر نہیں آئے۔ بھائی جو نہیں پاس تو پھر کون ہے میرا، ہر سو ہے اندھیرا، ہر سو ہے اندھیرا، ہے کون میری قبر پہ جو شمع جلائے، اکبر نہیں آئے۔ صغرا نے کہا ہائے برادر نہیں آئے، اکبر نہیں آئے۔ صلوات باؤ۔
ایک بار صلوات پڑھی اعلیٰ محمد و آل محمد۔ 4 مصرے۔ ذکر شب پہ آتے برابر آنسو، ذکر شبیر پہ آتے ہیں، برابر آنسو، اور جب یہ ڈھلتے ہیں تو بن جاتے ہیں گوہر آنسو، اور یہی آنسو تو ہے اپنے لیے کشتی نجات، ہم کو لے جائیں گے ایک دن لب کوثر، آنسو ذکر شبیر پر बर मोहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद सलावत. एक और सलावत पढ़िए अला मोहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Before I invite Hujjatul Islam Maulana Sayyid Ahmed Qazwini to address tonight's Majlis-e-Ali, just a few announcements. The first one, just a reminder, after this Majalis is over, there will be a question and answer session with Hujjatul Islam Sayyid Ahmed Qazwini. It will take place in the masjid across from Hazrat Abu Talib Hall. So for everybody, we request you to come, ask your questions, and inshallah Sayyid will cover various topics. Again, that is right after the majlis tonight in the masjid. Second announcement, the program for tomorrow, for the day of Arba'in, it will start with Salat Zuhrain, followed by the Amal, the recitation of Ziyarat of Arba'in. Then at 2 p.m., we will start the Soz Salam and Marsiya, followed by the majalis that will be addressed by Maulana, then Matam, and then Ziyarat. Third announcement, there will also be a majlis series here at Masjid-e-Ali for 28 Safar. Inshallah, more details will be shared in the upcoming days. Fourth announcement, Masjid-e-Ali is offering a health screening on October 1st, which is a Saturday. From 11 a.m. to 5 p.m., this health screening, it will be set up downstairs in the banquet halls. Details will be sent via email also in the upcoming days as well. Also another announcement, Masjid-e-Ali is still collecting donations for victims of the floods that took place in Pakistan. So we ask you to please donate generously. Masjid is still collecting donations. You can visit the website, the Masjid website, or contact our volunteers for more information, and they will be happy to help you. Also, for those who would like to donate to the Masjid, to sponsor a majlis, or to donate to Sadiq School, please, we ask you to donate generously. Again, you can visit the website or contact our volunteers, Nisar Bhai, Danish Bhai, Uruj Bhai, for further details, and they will be happy to help you, as well as Dr. Iqbal Jafri, Dr. Aftab Hussain, Dr. Khirazi. They will all be more than happy to help you and assist you. Also, another announcement, Jafriya School. The first day of class is October 2nd. For those that would like to register their children, please contact one of the volunteers. I believe there's still some time to register for classes, and they will be more than happy to assist you. Finally, you will notice outside in the lobby one of our own members of this congregation of Masjid-e-Ali, Brother Nihal Aga. He is a financial advisor. He is a certified financial planner, and so we have our own financial planner in our community. Please make use of this opportunity. He is outside, set up with the tables. You can take his card. I myself do have an appointment with him, so please go visit, and he will be happy to help you answer any questions that you may have. Before I invite Maulana, let us recognize the sponsors for tonight's majlis. They are Dr. Iqbal and Abda Jafri and family, Brother Muhammad Jawad Ali Khan, Sayyida Nigat Murtaza and Sayyid Ale Murtaza, and Sayyid Abbas Murtaza. For their marhumeen, for your marhumeen, and for those that have no one to recite for them, one Surah Fatiha. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless the sponsors for tonight's majlis and to increase the darjat of the marhumeen. And with that, I would like to invite Hujjatul Islam, Sayyid Ahmed Qazwini, to address tonight's majalis. Please welcome him with salawat ala Muhammad wa ale Muhammad. Bare digar nare salawat. बर हबीब खुदा खत्मुल अंबिया नारे सलावत.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. A second salawat for the love of Imam al-Husain alayhi salam. A third salawat with the loudest of your voices to hasten the reappearance of the Mawla Sahib al-Asri wal Zaman. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله صلى الله عليك وعلى أهل بيتك المظلومين صلى الله عليك يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله الحسين يا مظلوم يا غريب يا شهيد كربلاء. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the ziyarah of Imam Husain in this life and his shafa'ah in the next life, Ya Allah. Illuminate your hearts and majalis with a loud salawat for Muhammad and Al Muhammad. Respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The sacrifice of Imam al-Husain alayhi salam is one of the most inspirational stories of all time. The acts of heroism, altruism, chivalry, courage, braveness, patience, dedication, devotion to Allah, perseverance, resilience. You can all find these noble traits, acts of nobility in the story of Karbala, in the story of the sacrifice of Imam Husain alayhi salatu wassalam. From when he left Medina, when his journey began, and then to Mecca, and then the many stations that he settled in until he arrived to Karbala. And then after he was martyred, his family taken to Kufa. And then from Kufa to Sham. And then from Sham back to Karbala. And then finally back to Medina. So from Medina all the way back to Medina. This entire journey, you will find so many examples of nobility. Any virtue that you want, you will find it in Husain, in the companions of Husain, in the family members of Husain. Any act of heroism that you want, any virtue that you're looking for, you will find it in Husain, in Abbas, in Ali al-Akbar, in Al-Qasim, in Aun and Muhammad, in the companions of Imam al-Husain, Muslim ibn Awsaja, Habib ibn Mudahir. You will find it in Zuhair ibn al-Qayn, in John, in Abis, in Burayr, all of these loyal companions of Abu Abdullah. Any act of heroism, any noble trait and quality, you will find it in Zainab alayhi salam, in Kulthum, in Sukaina, and all of the other members of Ahlul Bayt throughout the journey of Karbala. And throughout this journey that began in Medina and ended in Medina, there are so many details that we hear about. When we come to the majalis of Imam Husain in the month of Muharram and in the month of Safar, we hear so many of these details, thousands of details of events that unfolded in each one of these stations. The words that were exchanged between Imam Husain and his family, his companions, between Imam Husain and the enemy, what happened in Karbala, what happened in the battlefield. Thousands of details that we hear from the minbar. But the question is here, brothers and sisters, how do we know that all these details are true? How can we verify what happened is true? Tomorrow I will recite the masa'ib of the day of Arba'in. Jabir ibn Abdullah came with Atiyya, Bibi Zainab, Imam Zainul Abidin. They said something, he said something, they went to the graves, and all the other masa'ib that I have mentioned, and you have been listening for almost the last 2 months. How do we know indeed these events happened? Because the story of Ashura happened how many years ago? Almost 1400 years ago. That's a very long time. How do we know that this is right? And the unfortunate, brothers and sisters, the sad truth is, not everything that you hear from the minbar regarding the masa'ib of Abi Abdullah al-Husain comes from a reliable source, comes from a credible source. Some of the same things that are being said on the minbar, part of the masa'ib of Imam Husain, are completely unfounded, unsubstantiated, no basis for them at all. Why is that, brothers and sisters? Why do we find this phenomenon? Many details being mentioned on the minbar that have no basis. The reason, brothers and sisters, or let's say one of the reasons, is because sometimes the individuals that are sitting on the minbar, the individuals that are presenting the stories of Karbala, have not done their research when it comes to what happened in Karbala. They hear something from another dhakir, they read something from a random book, they come to the minbar and they recite it. Sometimes you'll find some reciters, they are more concerned about making the masses cry than actually what? Than actually verifying if this comes from a credible source or not. Does it come from a source that I can rely on? It doesn't matter. It makes people cry. It breaks the heart of the people. And this is, brothers and sisters, this is where we distinguish between a dhakir and a alim. Unfortunately, this is something many of our Shias all over the world. Sometimes the line between what a dhakir is and an alim is, it's very blurry. A dhakir is someone that has a nice voice, can come on the minbar and can make people cry in a powerful way. He has a beautiful voice and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them orating skills. But have they done any research on what they're saying about the Maqtal of Imam Husain, the masa'ib? No. Maybe this dhakir heard these stories from another dhakir. Maybe he read them in a random book. He comes on the minbar and he says them. The alim, on the contrary, is the one who does his research, who knows where these stories are mentioned, which ones are reliable, which ones are not reliable. The alim may not be able to make you cry like the dhakir. The alim may not have a voice like the dhakir. But at least you know what he's telling you comes from a reliable source. And this is something that we as a community, unfortunately, have also what? Have also contributed to. That anyone that has a nice voice, that can what? That can bring out the tears, we will bring them and put them on the minbar. What are the credentials of this individual? We don't know. What are the, for example, what's in the resume of this individual? Has he studied history, Islam, Hausa? We don't care. Can he bring the masses? Can he make the people cry? Does he have a nice voice? This is enough. And wallahi, this is the only field in the world where you find this much chaos. Does this happen in universities? Someone wants to come and speak about the Civil War, correct? Random guy that knows how to talk, he comes to a university and he tells you about the Civil War. He has absolutely no background in the history of the Civil War. He has absolutely no PhD, no bachelor's. They bring him to, for example, a symposium. They bring him to a program in one of the universities and he's a random person. Does this ever happen? No way. In every field, they bring experts. They make sure that individual has done their studies, except when it comes to this poor minbar. The minbar, whoever is what? Whoever has the nicest voice, whoever can make people cry, this is the criteria. What are the credentials? Has this person does the research like the alim? When he comes on the minbar, he does research. When he tells you of the masa'ib of Imam Husain alayhi salam. And because of this, brothers and sisters, because we can no longer differentiate between dhakir and alim, you find many details that we have memorized, heard over and over again, are completely baseless. You do not find them in any book. Sometimes you wonder, where do these details come from? Because if you do the research, you don't find any trace in any history book, in any hadith. And I think today, brothers and sisters, we can better understand this because of the world of fake news. Let me give you an example. Now look at the whole COVID vaccine situation. Sometimes you will read a report about the COVID vaccine that it causes some harms, it may cause some harms, some reactions, some rashes. And then you look at the source of this news, you see, for example, it's the New York Times. You see, it's the Washington Post, it's BBC. Is this a credible source? Yes. Most people consider this a credible, trustworthy, reliable source. Does this mean everything they tell you is true? No. No. The Quran is the only book that's all right. Every other book, every other individual can make mistakes, can tell you the truth, but at least it's a reliable source. At least it's a credible source. And then you have certain other reports that come from what? From social media. From, for example, Facebook. You will see news on Facebook that don't take the COVID vaccine. You remember in the beginning when the vaccine was rolling out, you would hear people saying that they have placed a chip in it so that the governments would spy against you. Now, is this true? Only Allah knows. But what's your source? Is your source Facebook and WhatsApp and Twitter and I don't know, Instagram and all this? This is unreliable. How can you believe in something when it comes from an unreliable source? We cannot accept this. Now, at the end of the day, what comes from New York Times and what comes from Facebook, they could both be right and they could both be false. But what's the difference between them? One is coming from a source that you can rely on. That if I would narrate it to others, yes, I have a reliable source. The other is coming from an baseless, unreliable source. If I were come to the minbar and bring you news and then you ask me, Maulana, where did you bring this from? I told you, I saw a nice post on Facebook. Is this acceptable? Is it acceptable? Yes or no? In every field, it's not acceptable. In medicine, in physics, in chemistry, you name it. You can't rely on social media, Wikipedia, random websites, random books. It has to be a reliable, credible source. Only then you can rely on it. And this is what Allah tells us in the Quran, by the way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Hujurat, He makes this point very clear. There's a verse that the ulama call Ayatun Naba. What is Ayatun Naba? When you go to the Hawza, you will spend an entire month just studying this verse. Ayatun Naba is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, idha ja'akum fasiqun binaba'in, fatabayyanu an tusibu qawman bijahalatin, fatusbihu ala ma fa'altum nadimin. Allah says, oh you who believe, if someone brings news to you and that individual is unreliable, you cannot take that news. You cannot take it from him. You have to investigate. The Quran says, fatabayyanu, investigate. Make sure that you ask others. Make sure that you try to verify that news through other means, through other witnesses. Someone comes and tells me that something, I heard Fulan say something last night. And this person is not reliable. Can I trust this individual? No. The Quran says, even in your normal daily lives, do not rely on unreliable sources. Let alone when it comes to faith. Let alone when it comes to religion. That's why our ulama, when you see ilm al-hadith, ilm al-rijal, anytime there is a hadith, the hadith has a chain of narrators. What do they call it? Sanad. They will only accept the hadith if every single narrator is credible, trustworthy, and reliable. If the narrator is unreliable, that hadith will not be accepted. What do we mean unreliable? Number one, if the credibility of the narrator is under question. That person was caught lying, or that person was someone who, narrates all sorts of bizarre things, we don't take the hadith of this person. Or other times, the person can be majhul. What is majhul? Unknown. For example, we see a hadith, Zayd ibn Muhammad narrates a hadith from Imam Sadiq. Who's Zayd ibn Muhammad? We have no idea. We look in the books of Rijal, we don't find any trace of Zayd ibn Muhammad. Now Zayd ibn Muhammad could be one of the greatest companions. He could be someone honest. But how do we know that? If we don't know it, then this hadith is now unreliable. Does that mean the unreliable hadith, we toss it in the trash? No. It still has value, but what? We have to investigate further. We have to find other clues and try to verify the hadith through other ways. Can we solely rely on Zayd ibn Muhammad? No. Because the Quran says if it's an unreliable source, do not rely on it. If it's someone trustworthy, you can rely on it. This is when it comes to every single matter in your life. And more specifically, it becomes important in matters of religion. And likewise, brothers and sisters, when it comes to the Maqtal of Imam al-Husain and the incidents that happened in Karbala and Sham and Kufa, Arba'in, Medina, we are also taught by the Quran that if the source is unreliable, you cannot come and just mention it on the minbar, because you are attributing something to Ahlul Bayt without proof, without evidence. And this could be considered as blasphemy. This could be considered as lying against Ahlul Bayt. Even though my intention is good. I want people to cry. I see a story, it sounds very nice. But I have no proof. I have no basis for it. Can I go on the minbar and mention it? Absolutely not. Having understood this point, brothers and sisters, the question now is this. How do we know which sources are reliable and which sources are not reliable? Before I mention, can I please ask the brothers to get up and come closer to the minbar because it's getting crowded in the end. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So as we mentioned, there are some unreliable sources and then there are reliable sources for the Maqtal of Imam Husain. Unreliable sources, you can mention hundreds. Something you see on Facebook. Can you rely on that? Obviously not. Something you see in a random book. Can you rely on that? Obviously not. Something you see in your dream. There's this phenomenon that some individuals see. For example, Al-Abbas in their dream. Abbas says, you know what, on the day of Ashura, this and this happened to me. Can I go on the minbar and narrate this? Obviously not. We cannot take our religion from dreams. Dreams, enjoy them, correct? You can enjoy them, maybe they can be spiritually uplifting. But can I go and narrate it as if it's a fact? Absolutely not. You see it in a dream, you hear another dhakir mentioning it. Is this a reliable source just because another dhakir mentioned it? No. Our ulama mention, listen carefully, brothers and sisters. Our ulama mention there are two reliable sources for the Maqtal of Imam Husain. Any musibah you listen to has to come from these two reliable sources. What are they? Number one, the first reliable source that we can rely on are the history books. Old history books of well-known and respected historians that recorded and documented what happened in Karbala. And these history books are of two types. The first are history books that were written specifically on the Maqtal of Husain. A historian writes a book just on what happened in Karbala. For example, you have the earliest of those is Abi Mikhnaf. Abi Mikhnaf was a well-known historian. He lived during the time of Imam al-Baqir Sadiq Kadhim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He decided one day to write an entire history book, he's a historian, on the events of Karbala. So whoever he could find eyewitnesses that were still alive, or people who had met eyewitnesses, he would go after them and ask them what happened in Karbala, and he would document it until he compiled his book, Maqtal Abi Mikhnaf, the Maqtal of Imam Husain according to Abi Mikhnaf. Is this a reliable book? Yes, he's a historian. For example, you have Maqtal al-Khawarizmi, another historian, Khawarizmi, also wrote a book specifically on Imam Husain. You have, for example, Ibn Nama al-Hilli. He was a alim, Shia alim, also a historian. In his book, Muthir al-Ahzan, he tries to document everything that happened in Karbala. And finally, you have a Sayyid ibn Tawus that lived about 800 years ago. In his book, Al-Luhuf, or Al-Malhuf fi Qatl al-Tufuf, he documents many of the events that happened in Karbala. So these are books that were written just about the Maqtal. And then you have general history books. History books that have all the history of Islam, and then they will designate a chapter for Imam Husain and his Maqtal. And there are so many of them. Some of them written by Sunni historians, but well respected, and others written by Shia historians. For example, you have Ibn Sa'ad, famous historian, in his book Tabaqat. He mentions many details of what happened in Karbala. He mentions many details of what happened after Karbala, in Kufa, in Sham, and so on and so forth. For example, something that I had just recently discovered, Ibn Sa'ad, he narrates. He's a historian. He lived during the times of the later Imams, the 10th, the 11th Imam. Ibn Sa'ad, he narrates that amongst the individuals, the Shia of Ahlul Bayt that did not join Imam Husain and did not fight with him was Bishr ibn Ghalib. Who's Bishr ibn Ghalib? Where do we hear his name? We hear his name when we recite the dua of Imam Husain on the day of Arafah. You know the day of Arafah, there's that beautiful long dua of Imam Husain. Who narrates that dua? Bishr and his brother Bashir, the sons of Ghalib. They say, we saw Imam Husain on the day of Arafah in Hajj. He went out, he raised his hand, he cried, and he began to recite the long, beautiful dua of Dua Arafah. Bishr ibn Ghalib did not join Imam Husain in Karbala. Ibn Sa'ad says that Bishr ibn Ghalib, after Imam Husain was killed, also alongside Jabir, not just Jabir, he also went to the grave of Imam Husain, and he was seen, maybe after Jabir, maybe a few months after the incident of Karbala, he was seen at the grave of Imam Husain, and he was dragging his cheek against the grave of Aba Abdullah and crying, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive him because he did not support Imam Husain. This is found where? In a famous history book of Ibn Sa'ad. You have, for example, Al-Baladhari, also a historian, many incidents about whom? About Imam Husain in Karbala. You have Ibn al-Athir, you have Ibn Kathir, you have, for example, Sheikh al-Mufid. Sheikh al-Mufid, Shia scholar, also historian, has a beautiful book by the name of Al-Irshad. Irshad is a history book. Begins with the Holy Prophet until the last Imams. Many of the parts of his book, he speaks about what happened in Karbala as a historian. What happened in the entire movement of Imam Husain alayhi salam. So you find that all these books together, they represent our history books and their account of what happened in Karbala. One of our ulama, he tried to count how many reliable history books we have that mention the incidents of Karbala. He was able to list 33 reliable history books. Now, why do I say reliable? Because there are some history books that are unreliable, either because of the historian, his credibility is under question, or because his book has been lost and we don't know if the book that is here now, it's the same one that he wrote, or for other reasons. Up to 33 history books that document what happened on the day of Ashura in detail. Now, is everything in these books accepted? Is everything in these books 100% correct? Obviously not. There is no book, we said, besides the Quran. Yes, some other Muslims believe besides the Quran, for example, Bukhari, Muslim, anything they mention is also 100% sahih. But we, the followers of Ahlul Bayt, believe there's only one book that's all sahih, correct. That's the Quran. Any other book will have truth and will have some false, will have some unreliable accounts. So these history books, not everything in it is reliable. Any incident we reach The scholars have to what? They have to examine that incident. They have to compare it to other accounts of historians, perform cross-examination, just like we do with any other history incident, any non-Islamic historical incident, a war that happened 500 years ago, 600 years ago. How do we examine, analyze, and assess history? We do the same with these books. But at the end of the day, whatever is mentioned in these books comes from a reliable source. Even if it may not be 100% correct, but at least the source is reliable. It's a history book that has documented it. This is the first example of a reliable source that we can take the details of the Maqtal of Imam Husain. Number two, the second example of reliable sources for the Maqtal of Imam Husain are the ahadith of Ahlul Bayt. The Imams of Ahlul Bayt have told us in their traditions of what happened in Karbala. And you can find these traditions in the books of hadith, like Al-Kafi by Kulayni, like Al-Amali by Shaykh al-Saduq, like Kamil al-Ziyarat by Ibn Quluway, like Basair al-Darajat by Al-Saffar, and many other books. In these books, these ulama, they have gathered many ahadith of Ahlul Bayt. Amongst those ahadith, you will find instances where the Imams speak about Karbala. They will tell their companions, on the day of Ashura, Imam Husain said this, Imam Husain did this, this happened to Imam Husain, this happened to Bibi Zainab. And most of the ahadith about Karbala are narrated from three Imams. The fourth Imam, Al-Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam. Sallu ala Muhammad. The Imam was an eyewitness in Karbala. He was there. He witnessed many of the things that happened. So later in his life, he would report and narrate many things that he saw. And I mentioned one of them last night, if you remember. This is mentioned by Shaykh al-Mufid. He narrates, the Imam himself says the story. I mentioned it last night in the Musibah, of how the Imam says, it was the night of Ashura. I was sick, my aunt Zainab was taking care of me, and then I overheard my father Husain. He was reciting lines of poetry that only someone that is about to die would recite. I mentioned this, how Imam Husain said, Ya dahru uffin laka min khalili, كم لك بالإشراق والأصيل من طالب أو صاحب قتيل والدهر لا يقنع بالبديل وإنما الأمر إلى الجليل وكل حي سالك سبيلي. He spoke about how death will chase every human being and it will not let go until it takes you. He recited this famous poetry. Al-Imam Zainul Abidin himself says that when I heard this, I knew that my father would be killed tomorrow. I knew that the plan of Allah would not change, because there's always a possibility that Allah can delay. He can make a change in His plans. He says, I wanted to cry, but I held myself. But my aunt Zainab, when she heard that, she burst into tears, and she went and she told her brother, Aba Abdullah, if you leave us, who will we have after you? I mentioned the whole story. So this is one example of an incident that happened in Karbala. Who tells us? The Imam, Al-Imam Zainul Abidin. And there's so many other incidents. Al-Imam al-Baqir, for example, many ahadith you find, Al-Imam al-Baqir gives us some of the details. And probably the most lengthy of the ahadith of Al-Imam al-Baqir regarding Karbala is the hadith of Ammar al-Duhni. This hadith is narrated by a Sunni scholar, At-Tabari. At-Tabari narrates a hadith which is sahih based on the Sunni standard. Every narrator is authentic. He narrates it from Ammar al-Duhni. Ammar al-Duhni was a companion of the fifth Imam. Was he Shia or not Shia? It's not clear, but he loved Ahlul Bayt either way. His son Muawiyah ibn Ammar was a staunch Shia and a companion of Al-Imam al-Sadiq. Ammar, At-Tabari narrates, he went to Al-Imam al-Baqir one day and he told him, Yabna Rasulillah, I want you to tell me the story of Karbala, and I want you to say it as if I was there and witnessed it. So tell me all the details. Imagine you tell someone, tell me about, for example, the game or your wedding. I want you to tell me as if I was there. So that person would tell you all the details. And then At-Tabari, he says, Al-Imam al-Baqir, he began with how Muawiyah died and Yazid came to power. And most of the hadith revolves around Kufa and Muslim ibn Aqil. Most of the stories that we hear regarding Muslim ibn Aqil, when he went to Kufa and how people came and gave bay'ah and then they betrayed him and so on and so forth, you find it in the hadith of Imam al-Baqir that At-Tabari narrates. It's a very lengthy hadith. So this is another example. And then you have the sixth Imam. The sixth Imam, probably, you will find the most details about Karbala from the sixth Imam. Many ahadith from him. But there is one hadith that is the longest, the most extensive and lengthy. This hadith is narrated by Shaykh al-Saduq. Shaykh al-Saduq, that lived almost 1,100 years ago, narrates this hadith. How long is it? I read it the other day, 13 pages. The Imam is just telling, it's like he's telling a story. He begins with Muawiyah's death until Imam Husain was killed. 13 pages, he gives so much details. As Shaykh al-Saduq narrates it from whom? He narrates it from a man by the name of Abdullah ibn Mansur. Who was this man? Abdullah ibn Mansur was the nephew of Imam al-Baqir, but not the biological nephew. What do I mean? You know, in Islam, you can have a real mother, a biological mother, and you can have a mother through breastfeeding, correct? So if I, for example, when I'm a child, or my mother is you know, I have a, my mother is breastfeeding me, another child is brought to my mother. This was very custom before, there was no formula milk. If my mother breastfeeds that child 10 times or 15, there's a disagreement between the ulama, either 10 times or 15, that child becomes my brother. Not biological brother, brother through what? Brother through breastfeeding. So if that, for example, child was a girl, when she grows up, she's mahram. She doesn't have to wear hijab. The mother would be, that breastfed would be the mother. The father, the husband of the nursing mother would be the father. My children would be nephews of that child. So Imam al-Baqir had nephews that were biological, and he had nephews from suckling and breastfeeding. Abdullah ibn Mansur was the nephew of Imam al-Baqir. One day he goes to Imam al-Sadiq. He's a companion of the sixth Imam. And he tells him, Yabna Rasulullah, similar to the hadith we just mentioned, tell me about the Maqtal of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn. I want you to tell me the details. And Imam al-Sadiq begins to beautifully tell him the entire story, 13 pages. He begins with Muawiyah. He tells him before Muawiyah died, he appointed his son Yazid. And he told him, oh Yazid, make sure when you become the Khalifa, Husain ibn Ali gives you bay'ah. Because if he does not give you bay'ah, you will not receive the legitimacy that you need. Then Muawiyah dies. Imam al-Sadiq says, Yazid comes to power. The first thing he does, he orders the governor of Medina to extract the bay'ah from Imam Husain. Imam Husain refuses, says, I can never give bay'ah to someone like Yazid. And he is forced to leave Medina, goes to Mecca, and then the Imam mentions the journey of Imam Husain from Medina to Kufa, to Karbala. There's different stations where he slept, where he camped, who he met, what happened. All the details are there. Until the Imam mentions the story of Al-Hur. The Imam al-Sadiq says, Al-Hur, he was also asked by Ibn Ziyad to go with 1,000 troops to confront Imam Husain. And Imam al-Sadiq says this. He says, when Al-Hur left his house to go and stop Husain from going to Kufa, he heard a voice saying, Abshir bil Jannah. Paradise is waiting for you, O Hur. Imam al-Sadiq says this. Hur, he tells himself, woe unto me. I'm going to bother the grandson of Rasulullah and maybe kill him. And I am being given the glad tidings of Jannah. I don't understand. He did not know of the tawbah that he will have. So Imam al-Sadiq mentions how he confronted Imam Husain. He deprived him from going to Kufa. And how in the end he repented and he came to Imam Husain. And there's a beautiful speech. This is something you rarely hear on the minbar. That after he repented, he came to Imam Husain. Imam al-Sadiq says, Al-Hur gave a beautiful speech to the enemies. He defended Imam Husain. He told them, oh enemies, even the dogs are drinking from the Euphrates. And the grandson of Rasulullah is being deprived from the Euphrates. He condemned them. He reprimanded them until he told Abu Abdullah al-Husayn, my master, allow me to be the first sacrifice so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives me. And then he went and was killed. And then Al-Imam al-Sadiq mentions how each of the ashab went. Zuhayr ibn al-Qayn, Muslim ibn Awsaja, Burayr, Habib, the poetry. You know, each one when they would go, they would recite lines of poetry telling the enemy who they are and why they have come to fight. Who has documented this? Imam al-Sadiq has told us this in addition to the historians. And then the Imam, he mentions Al-Qasim, how Al-Qasim was killed. And then he mentions how Al-Abbas was killed until he mentions how Al-Imam al-Husayn was killed in the final moments. So 13 pages, beautiful hadith, Shaykh al-Saduq narrates from Al-Imam al-Sadiq. And there are many other ahadith from Ahlul Bayt. Al-Imam al-Radha, you see ahadith from him regarding the incidents of Karbala and after Karbala. Now, what is the criteria in accepting a hadith when it is attributed to Ahlul Bayt about Karbala? Any hadith you read says Al-Imam al-Baqir said this about Karbala. Al-Imam al-Sadiq said this. Al-Imam al-Radha said, you accept it? No. There is a very important criteria. Listen to this, brothers and sisters. But first, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. In order for a hadith to be reliable, a hadith from Ahlul Bayt about Karbala, the hadith has to be found in one of the early reliable hadith books. Like we said, Al-Kafi, Al-Istibsar, Al-Tahdhib, the books of Al-Shaykh Al-Tusi, Shaykh Al-Saduq, Al-Kulayni, Ibn Quluway, Al-Saffar, and so on and so on. Or even Bihar Al-Anwar. Bihar Al-Anwar from Al-Allam Al-Majlisi, which is the largest collection of the ahadith of Ahlul Bayt. How many volumes? 110. All the ahadith of Ahlul Bayt. Allam Al-Majlisi compiled it. So anytime you see a hadith that is attributed to the Imam, ask for the source. If you find it in Bihar al-Anwar or the other earlier books of the ahadith, then this is something that we consider as reliable. Now, why do I say this? Because nowadays, some of the stories about Karbala that are being attributed to the Imams cannot be found in these reliable books. Can we say these on the minbar? No, brothers and sisters. We cannot say them because they are not found in reliable books. And I will give you a couple of examples. Example number one. The other day, I was listening to one of the speakers. He was reciting some of the masa'ib of Imam Husain. And then he recited a hadith from Al-Imam al-Baqir. I had not heard it before. It's a very moving hadith. He said, Al-Imam al-Baqir said one day that we, the Imams, have only told our Shia a fraction of what happened in Karbala. Because if we would tell them everything, our Shia would die. Because of how difficult some of the masa'ib were. So according to this hadith, Al-Imam al-Baqir says, there are some things intentionally we do not tell our Shia. Because if we tell them, they will die. Some things that happened in Karbala, they cannot be said. Now, this is a very moving hadith. When I heard it, I wanted to cry. So I went and I began to research. Where's this hadith? You know where I found it? You know what's the source of this hadith? Even though it sounds good? Facebook. Facebook. This Dhakir apparently read it on Facebook. And I did extensive research on this hadith. Nothing even close to it. Now, could this be true? It could be true. Maybe the Imams didn't tell us. But do we have any proof that the Imam said this? No. Unless you consider Facebook as a reliable source. So can I go on the minbar and say, oh, people like that dhakir? Now, unfortunately, some other reciters may hear that reciter and they will come on the minbar and then one reciter keeps on telling it to the other reciter. When you go back, you see the source is Facebook. Where did it come from, brothers and sisters? Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. Can I go on the minbar and say this? No. This is example number one. There's hundreds of examples. I'll give you 3 examples. Example number 2 is a also famous hadith, I'm sure, a story. I'm sure all of you have heard this. There is a hadith that is attributed to Imam al-Husain himself. The hadith says that on the day of Ashura, Imam al-Husain alayhi salam was looking between two ways. He kept on looking to his right, and then he kept on looking to his left. He would look at his right, that is the tent of Zainab and the woman. And then he would cry, because he knew what would happen to them after Karbala. And then he would look to the left, the enemies, and he would cry. Bibi Zainab, she came and she told him, Aba Abdullah, when you looked at the enemies, why did you cry? Supposedly, the Imam told her, I cry even for the enemies because these individuals will go to hell because of me. How many of you have heard this before? And even some speakers, they will try to highlight how soft the heart of Abu Abdullah is. We don't deny this. And how merciful he is, that he cried for his enemies. What's the problem with this hadith? What's the source of this hadith? Also Facebook. Facebook and some contemporary books. Some random contemporary books. Without mentioning the source, they will tell you Imam Husain cried. Can you find it in any hadith book? Absolutely not. So can I go on the minbar and mention this? No, because there's no basis for it. I'm not telling you the hadith is da'if. There is no hadith. There's a difference between having a hadith, but it's da'if. Fine. Even if it's da'if, you can say it on the minbar because this is not salah and siyam. This is just, stories about Imam Husain. But there's a difference between having a hadith that is da'if and not even having a hadith. This is now a fabrication, a lie. So I cannot say it on the minbar. This is example number 2. And example number 3, the most interesting. Example number 3 is regarding Za'far al-Jinn. How many of you know Za'far al-Jinn? Raise your hands. Have you heard about him? Most of you. I was in a community recently, and some of the youth asked me, Sayyid, can you tell us more about Za'far al-Jinn? I said, who? Za'far al-Jinn. So it's as if I appeared as being ignorant. The Sayyid, I've spent years in Hawza. Who the heck is Za'far al-Jinn? So I told them, you know what, let me do some research. Tomorrow I'll get back to you. I had never heard of Za'far al-Jinn before. I went back, brothers and sisters, the 33 history books. You can search the word Za'far, the hadith of Imam. Absolutely no book mentions the word Za'far. Absolutely no book. The only source that mentions there was a jinn called Za'far is a book called Iksirul Ibadat fi Asrar al-Shahadat. It's a book that was written 200 years ago. So it's not an old book. By a scholar named Darbandi. In this book, he mentions secrets of Ashura. In this book, this is how he mentions the story. He says, I read in one of the maqatil. Which maqtal did you read in? He doesn't say which one. We have all the maqatil. I mentioned the names. We go back to the maqatil, we don't find this. So which maqtal did this alim find it in? We don't know. He says, I read in one of the maqatil. From whom? From one of the imams. Come on. One of the maqatil, one of the imams? Is this something I can rely on? Only 200 years ago. And that's why many ulama have even rebuked him. Why did you mention the story? Where did you get this from? When we go back to the hadith of the imams, this is baseless. We don't find this hadith anywhere. Where did you find it? Did Jibreel come down to you and told you this? Did you see it in a dream? Only Allah knows. So this alim at Darbandi, he was an alim, but unfortunately, he narrated some unfounded ahadith, baseless ahadith, that you can't find anywhere. He says, I found in some of the maqatil, he doesn't say which maqtal, from one of the imams. It could be Imam Ali, it could be Imam Askari, we don't know. He says that this imam, whoever this imam is, says this, that on the day of Ashura, everyone was killed. Only Imam Husain remained. He was about to go and fight in the battlefield all alone until he saw some dust. The Imam saw some dust rising. He looked, he saw someone that had so much aura, someone large, and he was riding a very strange ride. It wasn't a normal horse or camel. That man, that individual came to Imam Husain and he said salam to Husain, his father and grandfather. So the Imam told him, who are you that you are giving salam to me in this time? It's a desperate time. I'm going to fight. It's not a time to say salam and chat. Who are you? He told him, Ana Za'far Zahid. I am Za'far the Zahid. Zahid means the ascetic, the one who's, away from the dunya, very simple. And then he tells him, Ana Sultanul Jinn. I am the Sultan, the leader of the Jinn. And your father, Amirul Mu'mineen, appointed my father as the Sultan of the Jinn many years ago. My father died, I inherited him just like your father died and you inherited him. Sounds very nice, but the problem is the hadith is baseless. So the Imam says, what do you want? He says, I have thousands of jinn with me. We have come to Karbala and we want to what? We want to support you. We want to fight and destroy the enemies. According to this hadith, the Imam tells him, thank you, O Za'far, but I don't need your help. And the reason is because you can see the enemies, but they cannot see you. So it won't be a fair battle. The Quran says this about the jinn, right? إِنَّهُ وَقَبِيلُهُ يَرَوْنَكُمْ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا تَرَوْنَ. The shaitan and all the other jinns, they can see us, but we can't see them. So the Imam tells him that you can see the enemy, but they can't see you. So it won't be a fair battle. The Imam, even with his enemies, he wants to be fair. According to this hadith. He doesn't want any edge over them. Thank you so much. He tells him, I want to go and be killed and go to my grandfather. So please, thank you so much. May Allah reward you. You can just sit back and watch. So Za'far and he began to cry with all the other jinns. They saw the entire martyrdom of Imam al-Husain alayhi salam, and then he left. This hadith is mentioned in the book of Ad-Darbandi. Is this something we can rely on? Obviously not. Is this something I can come and mention on the... Now I can say Ad-Darbandi said it, yes. But can I attribute it to the Imams? Can I say that it definitely happened? Absolutely not. Because besides this book, which is not a reliable book, you will not find the name of Za'far anywhere. Now, what is reliable is something similar. I was doing research regarding the jinn and did they help Imam Husain. There is a hadith that Sayyid ibn Tawus narrates from 800 years ago. He narrates it in his book, Al-Luhuf fi Qatl al-Tufuf. Remember his entire Maqtal of Imam Husain. He narrates this hadith from a Shaykh al-Mufid. He says this hadith is narrated from a Shaykh al-Mufid. A Shaykh al-Mufid narrates it from Imam al-Sadiq. So there is a basis to it. Al-Imam al-Sadiq is telling the story of Imam Husain's martyrdom until he says when he left Medina, some jinn, a group of jinn, no Za'far, the word Za'far is not mentioned anywhere. A group of jinn came to Aba Abdullah. They told him, Yabna Rasulullah, we heard that you want to go and fight the enemies. Allow us to come and support you and we will destroy the enemies. According to this hadith, which is reliable, the Imam said no. Because Allah wants me to get killed in Karbala and that's the only way for me to transform the ummah and reform the ummah. I have to be killed. So this is the plan of Allah. Thank you so much. I don't need your help. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if I want, I can ask Allah to destroy all my enemies. I don't need you. So they keep on insisting. The Imam says, no, thank you so much. They leave and the Imam goes. But then he tells them, if you want, you can attend. You can attend Karbala and just watch. But you cannot participate. This is found in a reliable book, Shaykh al-Mufid, from Imam al-Sadiq. But Za'far cannot be found anywhere. And you know what's worse, brothers and sisters? At least, Darbandi mentioned it in his book. You know what these youth told me? They told me so many things about Za'far that truly, it's mind-boggling. They told me that our parents, some of the older generation, are telling us that anytime you have a turba, a muhr, and you see it goes missing. You have a muhr in your house, the turba, right, that you do sujood on. But all of a sudden you see it goes missing. What happened to it? These youth were telling me, our parents, some of our parents are telling us, Za'far, the jinn is the one that goes and steals the turbas. He loves collecting turbas. Type of nonsense is this, brothers and sisters? Aslan Ja'far himself hasn't been proven that he exists, let alone the fact that he goes and steals turbas. And they told me have you heard this before? I don't know if this is new to you. That was completely new to me. I told them, where do they get this from? This is all superstitious beliefs. Wallahi, it's because of these beliefs that we make other Muslims mock us. They say, these are the Shia. Look at their beliefs. They believe in all these superstitious things that their Imams never said, that even their early books don't mention. If Ja'far himself has not been proven, let alone. And you know what's funny? I saw the other day, someone showed me that someone in Iran had held a majlis honoring the death of Ja'far. They say that he died, I don't know, a couple of years ago. How in the world did they know that he died? And they held a majlis, a fatha. Just like when someone dies, we hold a majlis, we hold a funeral. A funeral was held for Ja'far. Wallahi, this makes a mockery of us, the Shia. Because if one day a Sunni comes to me, tells me, where's this Ja'far? I can't even find it in my books. Make us look so bad. You Shia believe in what? You believe in superstitious beliefs. You believe in nonsense. You believe in all these fictional stories. And unfortunately, there are people mentioning this on the minbar. And then you find at Darbandi, he further gives you more examples of Ja'far al-Jinn. He says, I heard this from an alim. This alim narrates from a student that lives in Isfahan. What's the story? He says that there was a student that studied in the Hawza of Isfahan. After he read the story of Ja'far, the alleged story of Ja'far, he said this student would always criticize Ja'far. Why did you abandon Husain? Even if the Imam told you no, you should have helped him anyway. You should have, how could you watch the grandson of Rasulullah being killed? He would always criticize him. So this student says that one day I was in my room. I lock the door, I'm sitting reading. All of a sudden I see someone mysteriously enter my room. I tell him, how did you enter my room? My door is locked. He told me, calm down. I am Ja'far the Jinn. He has come to meet the student. It's just the stories, it's not even a hadith. He told him, for many years you have been criticizing me because I did not fight for Imam Husain alayhi salam. But you have oppressed me. You have been unjust with me because you don't understand. I tried so hard. And he tells him the story. On the day of Ashura, I tried so hard to convince Imam Husain, but he kept on telling me, no, no, no. I cannot go against the words of my Imam, Imam al-Husayn. He says, so on the day of Ashura, we didn't leave Imam Husayn. Me and all my soldiers, we stayed in Karbala. We saw the entire battle. We cried so much. And then after that, by the way, I'll mention this between parentheses. There is a story, they say, I think this is also one of those fictional stories. They say there was a speaker who was speaking at, somewhere, and they told him that in this majlis, not only humans attend, jinns also attend. So you see that corner over there? I don't want to point any direction. These are all jinns. They look like human beings, but they're jinns. So he says, I gave my lecture, and then I went into the musibah. So he says, when I would recite the musibah, I noticed those jinns, sometimes they would cry, sometimes they would just stare at me. Sometimes they cry, sometimes they stare. After the majlis, I went to them, I told them, what's going on? Why do you cry, stare, cry, stare? They told me, we were in Karbala. We noticed, we witnessed the entire tragedy of Karbala. When you mentioned real facts, we cried. But when you mentioned nonsense, we were like, where is this guy getting this from? This never happened in Karbala. We were there. So anyway, so Ja'far, he tells the student, why do you criticize me so much? We stayed, we cried for Imam Husain, and then we helped Zainab. We helped the children from Karbala to Kufa, from Kufa to Sham. We helped the children, we helped the orphans. We made sure none of them got lost, none of them got killed. And then when we arrived to Kufa, it's a very strange report. When we arrived to Kufa, Zainab noticed that the children are so hungry, they're dying, they have no food. So she met with Fidda, Bibi Fidda. She told her, what should we do? Fidda told her, Rasulullah had given me three hajat. Ask Allah 3 things and Allah will give you. I have used 2 of them. I will use the third one now. Fidda raised her hand and she did dua to Allah. Ya Allah, bring us down a meal from the sky. Za'far is narrating this. He says, all of a sudden we noticed a meal came down from the sky upon Imam Zainul Abidin, Zainab, and all the other women and children. They began to eat from that meal, and that meal would never finish until they went back to Medina. From Kufa to Sham to Karbala to Medina. When they entered Medina, this is when the food finished. Now, unfortunately, in some countries, some Muslim countries, you'll hear some dhakirs. They will go on the minbar, they will tell you these stories as if they are facts. Well, they are all bedtime stories, brothers and sisters. Fictional stories. If we cannot find it in the history books that we can verify, or in the verified hadith of Ahlul Bayt, I cannot come on the minbar and say anything I like. So if there's one lesson, brothers and sisters, that we learn from these few days of majalis, we as Shia pride ourselves in using our intellect, right? This is what we say. We Shia don't just follow our parents. Unfortunately, with the masa'ib of Ahlul Bayt, the aql goes to sleep. The aql goes to sleep. Because in my country, this is how it's done. Because my grandmother or grandfather, with all respect to the elders, this is how they read it. Or that dhakir said it, it's right. No. This is not an academic way to approach anything, let alone the masa'ib of Abi Abdullah al-Husain. Tonight is the night of Arba'in, brothers and sisters. The night of the Chihillum of Aba Abdullah al-Husain. And the family of Rasulullah, the family of Aba Abdullah al-Husain, are on their way to Karbala. In only a few hours, they will arrive to the land of Karbala to visit the graves of their loved ones. Now, the actual masa'ib and what happened in Karbala, I will leave that for tomorrow, inshallah, after Salat al-Dhuhr. I will recite the entire tragedies and masa'ib of the day of Arba'in. But tonight, I want to go back a little to Sham and tell you some of the masa'ib that happened upon Ahlul Bayt in Sham. You know, Sham was probably the most difficult station that Ahlul Bayt had to go through. Do you know why? Because the humiliation that Ahlul Bayt saw in Sham was a humiliation that they had never witnessed in their lives. Sahl ibn Sa'd al-Sa'idi, this is found in the book of Al-Allam al-Majlisi. He narrates this from Sahl ibn Sa'd al-Sa'idi, one of the companions of Rasulullah who loved Ahlul Bayt. He says, I went to Sham in the beginning of Safar. He says, I went to Sham, I see that there is a holiday in Sham. People are celebrating. So I tell myself, there is no celebration, there's no Eid. Why are the people of Sham celebrating? And then all of a sudden I see that there is a parade, that there is a group that is entering the city of Sham. So I ask someone, what's going on? They tell me this is the family of Husain. Husain was killed in Karbala, and now his family are being taken to Sham as prisoners of war. Sahl ibn Sa'd says, La ilaha illallah. The family of Rasulullah are being paraded as enemies. He says, I quickly went and I saw all of a sudden spears, on the spears, heads. These heads, they reminded me of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. I could see the nur emanating from the heads on the spears, the heads of Husain, the heads of Abbas and the other family members of Rasulullah. He says, and then after that, what do I see? He says, I see all these women. Some of them, they are not fully covered with their hijab because they have deprived them from that. And these are the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. And then he says, I see a young man. It was Imam Zainul Abidin. He says his hands were tied to his neck in shackles. Allahu Akbar, like a criminal. This is how they brought Imam Zainul Abidin, and the people are parading, they are laughing at them, they are mocking them, they are swearing at them and insulting them. Sahl ibn Sa'd al-Sa'idi, he says, I saw a young girl. I went to her and I told her, who are you? She said, Ana Sukayna, I am the daughter of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn. She told me, who are you? I said, I am Sahl. I am a companion of your grandfather Rasulullah. Is there anything I can do for you? Sukayna tells him, yes, Ya Sahl, there's something you can do for us. Please go and ask the person that is holding the head of my father. Please ask him to what? To place the heads in front of us so that the people don't look at the woman of Rasulullah. The people are all looking at us. Allahu Akbar. Look at how hijab was so important for Ahlul Bayt. So please go and tell him to bring the head so the people look at the heads. He said yes. He went to the person that was carrying the spear of the head of Abu Abdullah. He gave him money. He told him, please just bring the head in front of the woman so they could be behind the heads. He says that I told him, he accepted. He brought the heads, he placed it in front of them, and then they took the family of Rasulullah as captives in front of a masjid on the stairs. Anytime there were prisoners of war that would be brought to Sham from any battles, they would place them over there and people would all watch them and mock them and swear at them. He says Imam Zainul Abidin was tied to his shackles. There was an old man that came to Imam Zainul Abidin. Allahu Akbar, look at the humiliation. He came and he began to insult and disrespect the Imam with every expletive that he knew. And then he said, Alhamdulillah that God exposed you enemies. He doesn't even know who this is. Al-Imam Zainul Abidin tells him, Ya Shaykh, have you recited the Holy Quran? He says, yes. What do you know about the Quran? Because Yazid had brainwashed people into thinking these are kuffar, these are disbelievers. So he told them, what do you know about the Quran? He says, have you read the verse where Allah says, قُلْ لَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ أَجْرًا إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَى. Allah says, He tells the Prophet to tell the people, I only ask you for one thing after I die, to show my family love and respect. That old man says, yes, I have read that verse. What does that verse have to do with you? The Imam says, oh old man, we are the qurba, we are the family of Rasulullah. I am the grandson of Rasulullah. And then the Imam continues, he tells him, Ya Shaykh, have you read the verse? إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. Have you not heard the verse of where Allah says that verily Allah wants to purify you, family of Rasulullah? He says yes. He says, oh Shaykh, we are the family of Rasulullah. And look at what Yazid has done to us. He has turned us into enemies, into prisoners, into captives. They say when that old man, he realized what had happened, he started to cry out loudly and ask Allah to forgive him. He told the Imam, please forgive me, I never knew this. May Allah curse Yazid for what he did. You see how difficult it was for Ahlul Bayt when they faced all that humiliation. And then the next stop was the palace of Yazid. This was also a very difficult moment for Ahlul Bayt. They went inside the palace. They see Yazid. He is sitting on his throne. They bring the head of Abu Abdullah. Yazid takes it. He places it in a bowl. And then he takes the stick and he begins to beat. He begins to beat the head of Abu Abdullah. While Imam Zainul Abidin is looking. While Bibi Zainab alayhi salam is looking. The head of Husain is being beaten with the stick of Yazid. Aywa Husayna, Aywa Madluma. But mu'mineen, mu'minat, perhaps the most difficult tragedy that took place in Sham was the tragedy of Ruqayya, the 4-year-old daughter of Husain. After they left the palace of Yazid, they took the family of Ahlul Bayt to a rubble, a place where there was rats and nobody lived. It was a place that was deserted. There was no ceiling. In the day it was hot, in the night it was cold. It is narrated that it was at night, everyone was sleeping. All of a sudden, a daughter of Imam Husain, Ruqayya, she wakes up. She had seen in her dream Aba Abdullah al-Husain hugging her, holding her. So she starts to cry, I want my father Husain. Where is my father Husain? They had not told her that Husain has been killed. They tell her, your father has gone on a trip, and they mean the trip of al-akhirah. She says, I want my father. She cries until all the other children wake up. I want my father Husain. Now that rubble was close to the palace of Yazid. The crying was so loud that eventually even Yazid began to hear. So he told some of his people, what's going on? They told him a daughter of Husain and wants her father. She wakes up and she wants her father. He tells them, then take the head of Husain to that girl. This man had absolutely no heart. She is crying and weeping for her father. All of a sudden, they bring the head of Aba Abdullah, and it is placed in a pot, and that pot is covered with a towel. They place it in front of her. She thinks they brought her food. She says, I'm not hungry. And Bibi Zainab tells her, my dear niece, this is not food. What you wanted, what you asked for, you will find it in this plate. She uncovered the pot and she saw the head of her father Husain, Aywa Husayna, covered with blood and injuries. She takes the head of her father and she hugs it. Can you imagine a 4-year-old daughter? I don't know if any of you have little children. Imagine what happens to them if they see the head of their father filled with the blood. Allahu Akbar. She threw herself on the body of her father, on the head of Husain, and she started to cry out, Abata, my dear father, who is the one that did this to you? Who is the one that beheaded you? Who is the one that made me an orphan at such a young age? Who is the one that filled your beard with blood? My dear father Husain. She begins to tell Imam Husain of all the calamities of Karbala. She cries and cries until all of a sudden she is quiet. They begin to ask what happened to her. Bibi Zainab tries to wake her up. Imam Zainul Abidin says, Aunt Zainab, leave her alone, for she has died out of grief. Aywa Husayna, Aywa Madluma. And that's why Ruqayya was buried in Sham. They had to leave her and go to Karbala. May Allah grant us all the ziyarah of a Sayyida Ruqayya in Sham. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا آل محمد أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. Brothers and sisters, it is the night of Arba'in. This is a night that Allah inshallah accepts our a'mal and grants us our hajat. Raise your hands with your broken hearts and your tearful eyes and supplicate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala together 10 times. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, we supplicate to you, we invoke your name through the blessings of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. We ask you, Ya Allah, to answer our hajat. We ask you to cure anyone that is in our majlis or listening to our majlis. Anyone that is sick, grant them full shifa and recovery, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Ya Allah, we ask you to hasten the reappearance of our Mawla Sahibul Asr al-asri wal-zaman. Make us amongst his companions, amongst the shuhada under the banner of Imam al-Hujjah. We ask you, Ya Allah, to grant us the ziyarah of Abi Abdullah al-Husain. Inshallah, all of us are granted the ziyarah of Husain next year. We can all walk from Amir al-Mu'mineen and Najaf to Karbala. We can walk to the shrine of our master, Abu Abdullah al-Husain. Ya Allah, grant us the ziyarah of Husain. Grant us the tawfiq that we can visit all of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. Grant us their shafa'ah in the next life, Ya Rabbal Alameen. And let us recite Surah Al-Fatiha for all the marhumeen that have departed us, and especially for the marhumeen of the sponsors of tonight's majlis. Let us recite Surah Al-Fatiha after a loud salawat for Muhammad and Al Muhammad. Just a quick reminder, brothers and sisters, I will inshallah go to the masjid now and we will have the Q&A session. Whoever is interested in attending, we will have an open Q&A session right now, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
قافلہ جا رہا ہے وطن کے لیے، کربلا میں قیامت کا ایک شور ہے، قافلہ جا رہا ہے وطن کے لیے، کوئی روتی ہے اپنے جوان لال کو، رو رہی ہے کوئی کم سخن کے لیے، قافلہ جا رہا ہے وطن کے لیے، قافلہ جا رہا ہے وطن کے لیے، اور اپنی بربادیوں کو گوارا کیا، خون میں ڈوبے گلوں کا نظارہ کیا، دے دیا فاطمہ کا بھرا گلستان، کربلا تیرے اجڑے چمن کے لیے، قافلہ جا رہا ہے وطن کے لیے، قافلہ جا رہا ہے وطن کے لیے، وہ قصر ظالم کبھی قید خانہ، کبھی نوک نیزہ، کبھی تازیاں کبھی کون سی تھی اذیت جو دی نہ گئی، ہر جفا تھی اسیر محل کے لیے. جب چلے تھے مدینے سے سب ساتھ تھے، اون و جعفر تھے، اکبر تھے، عباس تھے. جا رہی ہوں مدینے تو کوئی نہیں، اب مصیبت فقط ہے بہن کے لیے. قافلہ جا رہا ہے قبر قاسم سے ہے یوں مکاتے پھوپے، تیری شادی کچھ اس طرح بن میں ہوئی، کوئی سہرے کبھی پھول باقی نہیں، ورنہ لے جاتی قبر حسن کے لیے. قافلہ جا رہا ہے وطن کے لیے. کوئی روتی ہے اپنے جوان لال کو، رو رہے ہے کوئی کم سخن کے لیے. یا حسین یا حسین
زینب نے کیے بین یہ مرقد سے لپٹ کر، اٹھو میرے بھیا اٹھو میرے بھیا. زینب نے کیے بین یہ مرقد سے لپٹ کر، اٹھو میرے بھیا ہم آئے ہیں بازاروں میں درباروں میں ہو کر، اٹھو میرے بھیا اٹھو. ہم آئے ہیں بازاروں میں درباروں میں ہو کر، اٹھو میرے بھیا اٹھو میرے بھائی. زینب نے کیے بین یہ مرقد سے لپٹ کر، اٹھو میرے بھیا کر دیجئے بحل میری خطا اتنی تھی مجبور، میں بے کس و رنجور میں بے ارے گم ہو گئی زندہ میں امانت تیری دختر، اٹھو میرے بھیا ہم آئے ہیں بازاروں میں درباروں میں ہو کر، کس جا پہ ہے تربت علی اصغر کی بتا دو، آواز سنا دو آواز ہے کوئی تو صورت کے جو ٹھہرے دل مادر، ہم آئے ہیں بازاروں میں درباروں میں ہو کر، شرمندہ ہوں یہ داغ جگر پر ہے نمایاں، اے سید ذیشان اے سید اے سید ذیشاں پرسے کے لیے آئی ہوں بھیا میں لحد پر. اٹھو میرے بھیا، اٹھو میرے بھیا. ہم آئے ہیں بازاروں میں درباروں میں ہو کر. اٹھو میرے بھیا، اٹھو میرے بھیا. وہ میرا وفادار، وہ جرار، وہ غمخوار، ہم سب کا نگہدار، ہم سب کا کس جا ہے بتاؤ میرا عباس سے دلاور. اٹھو میرے بھیا، اٹھو میرے بھیا. ہم آئے ہیں بازاروں میں درباروں میں ہو کر. اٹھو میرے بھیا، اٹھو میرے بھیا. عباس کو بتلا دوں سکینہ نے قضا کی، پیاسی ہی سدھاری، پیاسی ہی سدھاری. رے تم ساتھ چلو مجھ سے نہ سنبھلے گا یہ سن کر. اٹھو میرے بھیا، اٹھو میرے بھیا. ہم آئے ہیں بازاروں میں درباروں میں ہو کر. اٹھو میرے بھیا، اٹھو میرے بھیا. ہم آئے ہیں بازاروں میں درباروں میں ہو کر. اٹھو میرے بھیا، اٹھو میرے بھیا. یا حسین، یا حسین، یا حسین. یا حسین، یا حسین، یا حسین، یا حسین، یا حسین، یا حسین. حسین یا حسین، یا حسین، یا حسین. حسین یا حسین، یا حسین، یا حسین. حسین یا حسین، یا حسین. لٹ گئے آل محمد کے گھرانے والے، 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 لٹ گئے سب مل کے جواب دیں. والے ہائے لٹ گئے آل محمد کے گھرانے والے، لٹ گئے آل محمد کے گھرانے والے. والے لٹ گئے ہائے ترس پانی کو جو کو سر کے لٹانے والے، ہائے ترس پانی کو جو کو سر کے لٹانے والے، لٹ گئے آل محمد کے گھرانے والے. والے سب مل کے لٹ گئے آل محمد کے گھرانے. ہو گئی شام انہیں شام کے بازاروں میں، ہو گئی شام انہیں شام کے بازاروں میں، ایک بیمار کو لاکھوں ہے ستانے والے. ہائے لٹ گئے آل محمد کے گھرانے والے، لٹ گئے آل محمد کے گھرانے والے ہائے لٹ گئے آل محمد ہے پانی تک تو نے نہ مانگا میرے مظلوم حسین پانی تک تو نے نہ مانگا میرے مظلوم حسین تیغ و خنجر سے پیاس اپنی بجھانے والے ہائے لٹ گئے آل محمد کے گھرانے والے کے گھرانے والے ہائے لٹ گئے بولی زینب وہ گری خاک پہ تصویر رسول بولی زینب وہ گری خاک پہ تصویر رسول چل بسے یاد بھی نہ کے دلانے والے ہائے لٹ گئے آل محمد کے گھرانے والے ہائے لٹ گئے
Testing 1 2. Testing 1
مد
2.
کے گھرانے والے ہائے لٹ گئے
Mic check 1 2. Mic.
ہائے رو کے کہتی تھی سکینہ میرے چاہو کہاں رو کے کہتی تھی سکینہ میرے چاہو کہاں لوٹ کر آئے نہیں پانی پلانے والے ہائے لٹ گئے آل محمد کے گھرانے والے لٹ گئے آل محمد والے ہائے لٹ گئے آخری مصرع ہائے زہرا کہتی بخشوا دوں گی انہیں محشر میں زہرا کہتی بخشوا دوں گی انہیں محشر میں جو میرے لال پہ آنسو ہے بہانے والے ہائے تر سے پانی کو سر کے لٹانے والے ہائے لٹ گئے آل محمد کے گھرانے والے لٹ گئے آل محمد کے گھرانے والے
غم حسین میں آنسو بہانے آئی ہوں غم حسین میں آنسو بہانے آئی ہوں غم حسین میں آنسو بہانے میں اپنے بھائی کا چہلم منانے آئی ہوں غم حسین میں آنسو میں آئی ہوں غم حسین میں آنسو بہانے کسی نے قید میں رونے نہیں دیا مجھ کو کسی نے قید میں کسی نے قید میں رونے نہیں دیا مجھ کو
کسی نے قید میں رونے نہیں دیا مجھ کو
وہ آج فرش عزا میں بچھانے آئی ہوں غم حسین میں آنسو بہانے آئی ہوں غم حسین جو زخم کھائے تھے تم نے وہ زخم گہرے تھے
جو زخم کھائے تھے تم نے وہ زخم گہرے تھے
جو زخم کھائے تھے تم نے وہ زخم گہرے تھے
جو زخم کھائے تھے تم نے وہ زخم گہرے تھے
جو زخم کھائے ہیں میں نے دیکھانے آئی ہوں
ہمیں حسین
تمہاری یاد میں دن رات جو تڑپتی تھی
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 میں اس یتیم کا نوحہ سنانے آئی ہوں
ہمیں حسین میں آنسو بہانے آئی ہوں
ہمیں حسین
Testing 1, 2, 3.
وہ دشت جسم کے شبیر تیرا خون بہا
وہ دشت جیسے کہ شبیر تیرا خون بہا
وہ دشت جسم کے شبیر تیرا خون بہا
وہ دشت جیسے کہ شبیر تیرا خون بہا
اسے میں عرش معلا بنانے آئی ہوں
ہمیں حسین میں آنسو
آخری بند
ہمیں حسین میں آنسو بہانے آئی ہوں
حسین تیرا لہورا گا نہیں ہوگا
حسین تیرا لہو رائگاں نہیں ہوگا
حسین تیرا لہورا گا نہیں ہوگا
حسین تیرا لہو رائگاں نہیں ہوگا
جو وعدہ میں نے کیا تھا نبھانے آئی ہوں غم حسین میں آنسو بہانے آئی ہوں غم حسین میں آنسو بہانے آئی ہوں یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین 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 اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين السلام وابن سيد الوسيين السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين السلام عليك وعلى جدك وأبيك السلام عليك وعلى عمك وأخيك السلام عليك وعلى المستشهدين معك السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن السلام عليك يا
So it sounded like the theme of your lecture was really about reliability of sources and the importance of this. And you started your lecture by referencing the New York Times as a reliable source and Facebook as maybe not a reliable source. My question to you is, have you researched and looked into the funding behind the New York Times and who controls the narrative of the major news outlets? And because, you know, speaking from the minbar and making an assumption about them being a reliable source, but if you look, I've looked into it a lot, and so I'm just curious, have you looked into who the families are who are funding these and the narrative that they push and the way that can control the minds of people?
Yes, that's a good question. Now, first of all, let me clarify a few points. I only mentioned New York Times as an example.
I did not want it to be, something that I'm advocating for, or some media outlet that I believe is, the best media outlet. But I'm just saying, based on today's standards in the US, if you narrate anything and then you're asked, what is the source of your news? And you say Facebook, this is absolutely unacceptable. But if you say the New York Times, this is more credible, this is more accepted by the people, because this is a news agency that has a reputation. I'm not saying that they're not biased. They could be biased, they could have agendas. Every news agency will be biased and have their agendas. So if you don't like the example of New York Times, fine, you can replace it with any other news agency. But even that